I am biased, as are you, and there's no getting away from it. This goal of complete impartiality is impossible. But what we do need to do is challenge our assumptions, still be aware of what our biases are. Where are we coming from? So, in this episode, episode 6 of this new series I've put out there to invite younger people and younger minds into the media literacy fold, this is for us to consider, well, maybe I am biased. Maybe I do have certain sort of like particular quirks in the way I see things. Of course you do. Of course I do. We all have our own sort of construct of what we think the world is, and we see things in a unique way. Now, despite my efforts in being a critical thinker, trying to be a better critical thinker, trying to just improve in every sort of facet of the way I see the world and process things and react and respond, despite my efforts, I know I still have my own very particular way of seeing the world and behaving within it. And that's all a culmination of 40 plus years of lifing. And even though it might be fewer years for you, you've still been you, no one else. You haven't sort of had a chip implanted in your, well, maybe you have, but you haven't had a chip implanted in your brain and you've just been this way for a decade. And then from 10 to 20, you've had another chip put in and you just each time had a blank slate. So you've just been renewed. And I think we can try and go through that kind of renewal process through study, reflection, spirituality, creativity, awareness, being really open. But still, we have to accept that every single one of us, and it doesn't matter who we are, whether you're the president, the prime minister, whether you're a toddler, you could argue toddlers are more superior than, okay, jokes aside, it doesn't matter who you are. All of us are human beings and we have all grown up and matured into these beings with our own very particular own world view of ourselves, view of others around us. And so the task is to become very aware of what our biases are. And that's why I designed this cap that's available now. Should have arrived today. The samples should have arrived today, so I could have worn one to show you, but it's called Biased. Just biased because we are. Let's own it. Let's own that we are biased. But we have to also then do, so first step is, yes, just admit that you are biased. Next step is, how biased am I about certain things? What are my biases? And how can I now try and increase and improve my awareness and my reflective thinking and my critical thinking? So that's the starting place for this episode. I hope you're well. I hope I've given you a sufficient amount of interest for this episode and for this series, as well as for my channel where I talk about media, digital political literacy. I provide informal commentary on my longer streams and now providing this more educational content for younger minds, because younger minds are so susceptible to so much information coming at them from every single direction that media literacy and critical thinking is just so important. It's so crucial. So I want to get to those younger minds. Just consider me as your sort of unofficial teacher in that respect. When I started this channel, I would get into conversations earlier on, and I would talk about, I'm trying to be impartial, or I am being impartial. And there was a brilliant commenter, and I can't remember who it was. So sorry if I can't remember your name, but we had a wonderful exchange. And I do have really great exchanges with people I completely disagree with, or people who completely disagree with me. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. And this commenter said, Serena, you cannot be impartial. It's just not possible. But what we need to do is admit and be aware of where we're coming from. And so when we're then coming together to have that sort of connection, communication, we bring so much more to the table rather than turning up in a dishonest way as a bad faith actor, as somebody who is concealing, who is pretending to have a certain view when they don't have that view. And so the reason why this is so important is because you have to be aware and you have to understand, see, accept that the people you vote for, the teachers you have, the health or personal development, psychological, mental health professionals that you put your trust in are all human beings, and they have their own sort of subjective way of seeing the world. And that it can have an impact on how they show up as a professional, whether it's the prime minister, president, whether it's that teacher, that person that you sort of, again, that you are relying on for information and guidance, or somebody in the health, mental health field. They all have their own view, their worldview, their point of view. The role of those people in sort of positions of leadership is to be aware, to know what their view is, and to consider and weigh up everything, everything within that sort of microcosm of a classroom or macro view of a society, a nation that they have to lead. It's their job. It's their job to gather all of that sort of insight and look at all of those different perspectives and factors and interrelationships and dependencies. And my light just went out. But it's their job. That's what they have to do. And as somebody who is a systems thinking practitioner in progress, as I'm studying it at, my light's just gone out, as I'm studying it, the more I progress with it, the more I am reminded that there are so many professions or fields of life where this sort of holistic thinking approach, this reflective thinking approach, like taking it all into account approach, is so lacking. It is so lacking. When I have conversations or I stream about, the American immigration policy, and we get into it in the comments, or when I was looking at the comments made, which was seen and deemed as racist by some or many or whoever, a segment of the sort of American commentator space, of what Ann Coulter, somebody who's quite conservative, said about Vivek Ramaswamy, who was running for president and is now a sort of a vice presidential hopeful, who is Indian, born in America, and how, so many people had so many different, like such different, polarizing, opposite, extreme, tribal views, and they all have tentacles in so many different sort of belief systems and values and knowledge, and you've got to really appreciate how that person got to that opinion. You've really got to understand, rather than just putting, okay, here you go, here's a post-it, that's what that is, let's just put a label on it there. It's just, it doesn't really give you enough, there's not enough depth there for you to fully appreciate where that person's coming from. Whether or not they are objectively right or wrong, it's still not enough. It's just still not enough to just label it in the first instance, sort of very superficially. You need to get into the layers, not the weeds, the layers. When we say weeds, it's all, and I'm sure I've used that phrase as well, it's almost diminishing, minimizing all those layers of information and detail. It's more than just nuance. It's more than just little bits of extra crumbs, whereas the main meat is here. No, no, no. It all counts. All those layers count. And that approach I feel is missing so much, because when you can do that for yourself, when you can sort of unravel a little bit, or sort of like pick apart the layers of your own sort of thinking and your own opinions, like, how did I get to this place? Like, why do I think this about what's going on? Is it because somebody I really trust and admire and respect holds this position, and therefore I'm going to adopt the same position? Fine, if you're inspired by that person, so you will adopt the same position. But what about, how did they get to that? What was their thought before? Maybe they changed their mind. Um, what is the other point of view that's available? Uh, c- Even if I don't feel comfortable taking on that point of view, what is it that's sort of salient or like relevant? What is it that I should absolutely be hearing and paying attention to and listening? There are so many examples of this sort of like polarized way of seeing things happening in the world right now, and it's just so easy to get caught in the camps. And when you want to take a stand and have an opinion, it's really difficult, because you might be coming at it from a completely humanitarian point of view, but you've now just been slotted in to this sort of, let's say, bandwagon or a category, which is quite unfair. Or if you question something that's taking place and you're not all the way comfortable with the way it's being carried out, and you raise a question or you want to have a conversation about it, you are then accused of being something that's not good, not right, something quite anti. And so we've gotten into this space online and offline where people are afraid to not only, I guess, take a position, but if they have taken a position, if they do have a view, they don't want to share it. And we need to get into the practice of having views, first challenging our own before we share it. And that's what this is about. That's what this series and all the content here is about for us sort of starting to scratch the surface and getting used to that process, and processing things in that way, so that we're not being lazy almost. Now, there is no subject, in sort of like, I guess, pre-university college level that primarily focuses on critical thinking, media literacy. It might be woven into subjects, but there's no core subject. And it's needed. We know it's needed. It's the call for media literacy training and teaching is very high, especially considering what's going on with AI, but with all this so-called misinformation, malinformation, disinformation, it's needed, and we all have to be much more savvy. But I would say, let's before we try and appraise and verify the information and the content that we're consuming, let's get into our own layers first. Let's get into our own data and have a think about the data that we hold and why we hold the data that we hold. Why did we choose that particular stance? Why does that view resonate more? And sometimes it's just enough just to ask yourself and ask ourselves a question like, why do I resonate more with this than that view? Why does that view offend me so much? And should I be offended? Like, why am I taking so much offense from it? Why am I so strongly reacting to it? Why am I wanting to react to it? Because think about the things that you don't immediately react to, but you have a little think about. You haven't gotten offended, so there's no emotional reactivity. Compare that state to when you notice the reactivity. Now, are you going to be thinking clearly? Are you thinking clearly? Is there clarity there? Or is it that you are so resolute with your value system, your beliefs, and that because there's been a challenge to it, that you just absolutely cannot stand and you must say something? Sometimes I think that if we choose to just sort of take a moment and come at the sort of situation in a not neutral way, but in a unpredictable way rather than the predictable way, which is, you know, being offended, and perhaps rightly so, because a lot is said sometimes to deliberately cause offense and get a reaction. What if we shocked the person, and we didn't react in the way that they would want us to or expect us to? What if we were able to more critically challenge it rather than emotionally and reactively challenge it? And so, again, it starts with us. And then once we get more comfortable with the challenge, then we can start to do that more so outwardly and externally. And then that's where I believe that we will then see more changes and improvements. But if we can start to do this in a micro way, just, amongst our sort of like smaller networks and our groups, we can get more comfortable. It doesn't have to feel so scary. And so if we can do this with our kids, if kids can do it with their siblings without without getting into a fight, without getting super reactive, then we're practicing. We are strengthening those muscles. We might be having to develop that sort of muscle that isn't there, that has no sort of strength, and we have to really develop that. So that's what all of this content is for, and that's what this episode was for you to, again, be aware of your own stance, your biases. Why do you see things the way that you do? Why do you feel and believe the things that you do? And it doesn't mean that you have to like try and remove all your subjectivity. It's just being aware, because like I said, it's pretty impossible for you to just get completely neutral. You can make real efforts to be as neutral or balanced in a situation, but usually that's only really possible when you don't have a dog in the race, when there's nothing in that sort of situational scenario that's actually going to harm you. It's easier to do that. But when you are entwined with the situation, or the problem, then it's much more of a challenge. But then that's where the magic happens, in the sense that if it's more challenging, face it, like get to grips with it, see what can happen as a result of, grappling with it rather than just backing away. So let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. The comment section is just the best section. I just absolutely love it. So please feel free to get in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Remember, the biased merch is available, number one. Number two, you can join this channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, but you can join this channel. I also have a Patreon community. There is more information about what I do, how I work, the way I work. Everything is in the description. But first and foremost, please just share this playlist of episodes with others if you have gotten value from this, and more content is on the way. It's a big year. It's an election year in many countries, but if we're in the sort of Western hemisphere dominated by British and American politics, then yeah, it's an election year in both the United States of America and in Britain. So please just feel free to make requests and recommendations of things that you'd like me to react to or speak about separately from this series. That's also completely cool and fine. But for now, let's just become more aware of why we see things the way that we see them. Let's deconstruct it. And let's see what we get, what we arrive at. What are the layers that you're working with? And what if you can, rather than getting rid of the layers, what if you can sort of add some other elements or some other let's say, tools, or some other approaches to grapple with issues that perhaps you tend to grapple in a sort of a predictable way. Maybe there's a different way, and maybe you could just add another string to your bow, and let me know how that goes for you. I'll see you in the next episode.